Welcome to a very special edition of Storytime with the Professor. It's going to be very, very different today because I'm going to be talking to you about something else. How we put together our biggest puppet show, String City, Nashville's tradition of music and puppetry. This is our biggest show. And so I thought I'd do this today instead of our regular story time, because people are often asking how we put our puppet shows together. And this is the biggest one of all. We have a long tradition of puppet storytelling at the library, and it's all thanks to this guy right here, Tom Tishner and his puppets. And I'm going to show you some of his puppets in just a little bit. So String City would normally be performed for 2 weeks around the 4th of July and 2 weeks around Thanksgiving. Unfortunately, this year we're not able to do it around the 4th of July. Maybe we'll be back in November, so look for that. And look at the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum website for upcoming programs of String City. But it took a lot of people to put this puppet show together. Here with the Nashville Public Library, the Nashville Public Library Foundation, the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum in Nashville, and of course our puppet troupe, Wishing Chair Productions at the Nashville Public Library. The idea for putting together this big puppet show was Steve and Judy Turner, and they made this show possible. So he saw we were doing a show about an introduction to jazz, our Ellington show, and said, why don't we do one about country music? Because Nashville, Tennessee and country music are synonymous. So we went to the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum, and here is a great picture of the building. If you've never been to the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum, you need to go. It is a tremendous place. Just look at the outside. The outside itself is fascinating. Inside, it's even much more. It's a treasure trove of history and all sorts of artifacts and things from the beginning of country music recording up until today. And that's what we tried to do with our puppet show, to show you how it began and where we ended up. So we met with some of the experts at the Country Music Hall of Fame, folks like Jay Orr, Michael McCall, Alan Stoker, and here with Mary is Ali Ton. And I think at our very first meeting, we had 8 pages of names and songs that we could choose from to try to tell the story of this journey of country music recording from the beginning to today. And very instrumental in this was this gentleman right here, Mr. Tom McBride. He is a tremendous musician, musical director for Dollywood Theme Park at the time, and also worked with lots of country music acts. He was also a treasure trove of wealth of music, did musical arrangements, worked with lots of country music stars, including Dolly Parton and others, and also one of the greatest guys you'll ever meet. So we got together and put together an outline, deciding what type of puppets we would use to represent different musical acts, and then put it all together in what we call storyboards. They kind of look like comic books, to just sort of tell the story so people can get an idea, because there's going to be a lot of people working on this puppet show, and we wanted to be consistent and let everybody see the vision that was inside of our heads and come up with designs. Here's the drawing of the Johnny Cash marionette that would lead our puppet builders into building the puppet itself. Now here's a fun little display of sculpting a head. We started with a cardboard skull and added clay to it, and eventually we get Roy Acuff's head, the king of country music, Roy Acuff. Now this isn't how we do all of our sculpting, but this is a fun way to do it. Here are some designs for the marionettes, and I think that's Charlie Pride's head on the right-hand side, sculpted by Miss Morgan Maidens. And speaking of, I'm going to show you. Here's another one of Morgan's sculptures. This is the Johnny Cash head for our Johnny Cash marionette, sculpted out of clay. We take that and we make a rubber mold. See this? Yeah, as I can put my hand in it. It's called a negative, cast from the sculpted head, and then we pour our liquid plastic into it and make the head that will become the marionette. The plastic is good because it's kind of indestructible, but it can be tricky to work with. Now, here's the George Jones puppet head being covered with the rubber mold. And kids, can you tell what the walls of the mold are made out of? That's right, of course, they're Legos. That way we can make the mold any size we want, bigger or smaller, and save product as well. So, taking pictures of country music stars, sculpting their heads. There we have a number of heads, and you might recognize the young lady in the back, Taylor Swift, who also makes appearance in String City. There's Mr. Brett from our puppet truck, casting some of the plastic heads and pieces and parts of the puppets. As you can see, safety is very important. And even back then, we used gloves and face masks for breathing until we could get the pieces and parts together. Another important element of telling this story are the instruments. There's Ernest Tubb, or his guitar, at least, and a picture of him. And at the end of the song, he sings, "I'm walking the floor over you." He would flip his guitar like he used to do. And it says "thanks" on the back. There's Mary Mary and Jane Miller. Jane Miller is instrumental, pun intended, in building the little miniature instruments used in our show. Here we are assembling some of the puppets. There's Joshua and Miss Morgan painting the head of Ernest Tubb. Here's a fun little sculpture. Do you recognize what that is supposed to be? It's actually a little joke on Mount Rushmore. And the group Alabama sings mountain music. There's Miss Morgan sculpting it. Their mouths move and they sing the song. And it's quite a fun little moment in the show. Some of the marionettes have moving mouths. And to do that, we went to an expert, Shannon Shrum, who builds puppets. And he's a ventriloquist. And he builds wax figures. And he created some of the mechanics and some of the puppets. And another great guy to work with. Here's the wonderful Roberta Labor, who was in charge of all the hair, and she created the hair that was used with the puppets. And Mary Mary building the dancing fiddle for our Flatten Scruggs moment. Here's a little clip of that. There you go. Well, you see, it's not finished there, but sometimes you got to experiment with it to make sure it's working the way you want it to work. Then we also had to go to the studio. Here we are at West Park Studios. Tom Reeves is the engineer, and he assembled all of these songs in order to tell the story of the history of the recording of country music. And that's a very important part of the story, is that there's no dialogue. The only spoken word is that of Miss Minnie Pearl when she comes out to tell a joke. Otherwise, it's just music that tells the story. We got other artists involved. Here's the background for a little segment in the show, Porter Wagner. And that was created by Miss Emily Davis. There she is with John McSparron. And they are building the Humphrey Bait and his Possum Hunters puppets. We use different artists for different segments. There's Courtney Adair Johnson and Ricky Skaggs for Country Boy segment. She's a wonderful artist, well known for using recyclable materials. And he's actually made out of cardboard. He flips around. Very clever, and very fun. Another artist, Louise Krause, painted some of the backdrops. And this is just a gorgeous one for DeFord Bailey, the backstage of the Opry is sitting here. And he is out front playing his harmonica in front of this incredible, beautifully painted backdrop. And there is the Opry backdrop itself, also painted by Miss Louise Krause. Now we had different segments. One of these segments is sort of a throwback, inspired by what we saw at the Country Music Hall of Fame. There you can see Pete and Josh and Morgan and Stanley Carr working some marionettes. And we shot this segment to sort of give an idea, adding an old film effect and showing Tom Tischner's marionettes. And some of these puppets are 50, 60 years old, dancing to country music. And in this case, it's Greenback Dollar Bill by the Possum Hunters. Fun little marionettes made by Nashville's master puppeteer Tom Tischner. Dancing once again, you can see the old film effect that we used to sort of make it seem like this was old film footage, but it wasn't. And this was inspired by what we saw at the Country Music Hall of Fame. And we saw film footage of people dancing to country music. It's one of the first things you see when you go into the museum. So then there is the set. There is a miniature version of the set to give you an idea of what it looks like, and our friend Ruben Torres painting the set itself. Now, one window was completely dedicated to projections and animation, and these were created by Galen Fott, who has his own animation studio here in town, Big Fott Studios. And so all of the titles, all of the animated titles come across the screen like a Hatch show print being printed. And there you can see Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs. And sometimes he even created animation to look like shadow puppetry because we might be busy working on something else. Now I'm going to show you a clip from Keith Urban's moment in the show. The Keith Urban puppet is driving a car in front of the screen during the song Days Gone By, and specters of country music artists go floating by him. Let's see if you can name them. Now, there is a fun segment in the show where Mary Mary, in this clip, appears as Patsy Cline singing Sweet Dreams. So now as we get closer and closer to showtime, we have to add strings to the puppet. There's Miss Haley Townsend adding some strings along with David Torres. You might have seen him in past broadcasts of Storytime with the Professor. He's now part of our puppet truck and a local magician. And there he is as a young boy adding strings to the marionettes. So it comes to showtime. This is a more recent picture. It usually takes 4 or 5 of us to do the show. But for opening night, we pulled the stops and got all of the puppeteers that we could find together for a big, wonderful opening red carpet, walking all the puppets for their very first appearance. And here is the show in its place in the Ford's Theater at the Country Music Hall of Fame. And we take you through this whole journey where you get to see legends like Johnny Cash and June Carter. And of significance, here's Hank Williams Sr. and our Dolly Parton marionette. Here's Miss Jennifer Klein adding the dress to the Dolly Parton marionette. So I wanted to show you some of the puppets from String City that I just happen to have in my house studio here. The show itself starts and ends with the song, Will the Circle Be Unbroken? So the first thing that you see puppet-wise are shadow puppets of the Staple Singers singing, Will the Circle Be Unbroken? And then we move to this gentleman, DeFord Bailey, playing his harmonica. Now, he is a rod puppet and is usually performed by our Miss Evelyn in the show. And he plays his harmonica. Here we go. There's a string in the back, and she manipulates him perfectly in the show. It's a great way to start. He sort of mimics a train as he plays. Now, a fun little bit of trivia is that DeFord Bailey's family came to see the show, and they took up the first 2 rows of seats during one performance. And at that time, DeFord Bailey did not have a hat. And they came up to us afterwards. They were just wonderful, lovely people, and said he always wore his hat when he played on stage. So now DeFord Bailey has a hat because it's important to be correct in the portrayal. And sometimes we go a little more cartoony. Like we have a moment where we have clogging banjos and guitars during Flattened Scruggs. It's always a popular moment. And I have a couple of the marionettes. How many of you will recognize this lady, Miss Minnie Pearl? And there she is. You can see we also have miniature microphones for them to perform. And as I said, she's the only one who actually talks. Everything in the show is music. But she comes out and tells a joke, so she has a moving mouth to tell her joke like she would do every week on the Grand Ole Opry. You know, she even has a little price tag hanging from her hat. Isn't that fun? Here's some more fun. I'm sure everybody recognizes this fella. One of my favorite puppets of all time, the man in black, Johnny Cash. He comes out and he sings with June and sings Ring of Fire and Folsom Prison Blues and those songs that made him so famous. He can gesture with his arm, and then there's a special string that I can pull to get him to play his guitar. Really marvelous, marvelous stuff created by our wishing chair team. And how about this one? Here is Miss Dolly Parton, built by Philip Huber. And I have Philip Huber with us today to tell us a little bit about how he made these marvelous puppets. So we are very fortunate today to have with us marionette artist Philip Huber of the Huber Marionettes. Here is a picture of Philip with one of his wonderful puppets. And here is a little video of some of his work. Wow, wasn't that wonderful? And here he is,
Hello.
Philip Huber. Oh, it's wonderful to see you, Philip.
Oh, it's so good to be with you. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, well, folks, you need to know that Philip played a very important part in our production of String City. He is responsible for being a consultant on the entire project because his knowledge of puppetry is so vast and wonderful. He has studied puppetry. He's one of America's greatest puppeteers, and he got involved with us and helped us out. He's also one of the nicest people you'll ever meet, and that's Philip Huber.
Wow.
He built significantly two of the puppets in the show, the Hank Williams Sr. marionette and the Dolly Parton marionette, and they are gorgeous puppets, and we're going to just talk a little bit about that. Is that okay with you, Philip?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I had so much fun working on this project.
Well, you're such an important part of it. We need to have you involved with this little special about String City. So I'm going to bring up some pictures that you sent me of that you took while you were constructing the puppets, and we'll start with Hank Williams. So what do we have here, Philip?
This is the clay model for his head. And with all of the marionettes that I build, I start out with a clay model, and then I'm going to be making a plaster mold from that. And then I have a material that goes inside the mold that's called celastic, and that's what the head is created out of. And you'll notice that he has wooden beads in the eyes there, and there's a reason for that, because he was going to have animated eyes, animated mouth. I don't think I actually did the animated eyes with him. I believe he just had regular eyes, but
yeah, there he is.
Yes, but he does have the animated mouth. So
he has the animated mouth, yes, and he gets such a reaction when he appears on screen. Let's see, we have some of his hands here that you carved.
Yeah, those hands are carved out of a material called sculpt wood, and I start with a wire armature, and then I carefully put this two-part, it's almost a two-part resin type of thing. It's called sculpt wood, and I put that on in very thick layers on top of that wire, and then I take a carving knife after it's cured and carve it down, because it carves just like wood, and it's lightweight but very sturdy.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now let's look here. Here's the body of Hank.
Yes. Now he's mostly a wood marionette that you can see there, although his legs, since the legs were going to be hidden by trousers, I didn't have to do a lot of carving on them. So he has pretty basic, just dowel wood legs, and those are good if puppeteers are starting out. It's a nice, easy way to make legs. Yeah. And of course, there's no need to do really fancy legs if they're going to be hidden.
Yes, so, and we can see your design on the paper underneath the puppet.
Yes, that's right. I design all of the characters out full scale on graph paper, and I have a front view and a side view. And from that, it gives me all the patterns for me to cut out the wood parts and make everything, make sure the head is the right size and the hands and all of that.
Wow. Wow. Now here's a more complete version with the head attached.
Yes, there he is. Now you notice the arms are made out of just stuffed cloth. And again, since they're covered by sleeves, I could do that. And the stuffed cloth works so much better than actually carving them out of wood. It makes the marionettes lighter and they're more flexible. The arms move better overall with that type of a construction.
Right, right. Here's a little detail on the feet. Look at that.
He had fancy boots. Whenever I researched him and I saw pictures, he liked to wear the fancy boots, but they were inside the cuffs of the pants, so they didn't have to go up all the way. But those are full cowboy boots and just cut off at the top there so that it won't inhibit his ankle joint.
Right, right, right. See all that detail we need to know. So we're correct in building the puppet, and there's the final puppet.
Yes, there he is. He's a great guy. I was so excited to do him because, in particular, when I researched all the different characters, that all the different people, the famous country western singers and everything that you had decided to have in the show, when I researched him in particular, he seemed to just be a puppet on stage. He was just so animated. And I love that. Very expressive. So I thought, okay, I have to work on him. I have to build him.
Oh, well, you did. It's such a beautiful puppet. And another beautiful puppet is the Dolly marionette that you built. Now, what are we looking at here?
Yes. Now, Dolly's is the same thing, the clay model for her head. and the eyes with wooden beads in there because she was going to have animated eyes and animated mouth.
Okay. Let's see here. Oh, there's
Yeah.
the final.
There's the finished head after it came out of the mold, and I had to sand it down and smooth it and then carefully paint it. And I airbrush on some of her makeup, the cheeks and the shadow above the eyes and things like that, and then hand paint everything else.
Right. Here's
Here's what the animation looks like.
Right. Yeah, she opens and closes her eyes and her mouth, and it's just a tremendous effect on stage what she sings. Coat of many colors and I Will Always Love You.
And here are her hands also the same way. And here I like to point out, you notice there are little wires in between each of the fingers. And that's on purpose because a marionette that has open fingers can actually grab its own strings and tangle itself. So you put in what's called guard strings, or in this case, it's little thin wires. So they're guard wires, and they keep the strings of the marionette itself from getting caught inside the fingers of the hands.
Right. That's great. A great thing to know about if you're making marionettes, really. Okay, now here was
the beginning of her body. Now, in this particular case, she has beautiful legs because you're going to see them. She wears a shorter skirt at the beginning and then a long skirt towards the end. Right. So I spent a lot of time doing nice carved legs with detailed ankle joints. And it's kind of a ball and socket joint at the knee there, a ball for the lower leg into a socket in the upper leg.
Right.
And
then her foot.
Here is the finished foot and creating a shoe on top of it. So I carve this foot in wood first, and the heel of the shoe is actually made separate. I put a stainless steel plate inside of the heel, the wood heel there, and then I cover it with an epoxy putty so that it makes the heel on her shoe very strong so she can dance around very easily and she won't break a heel.
Wow. And here is the final puppet.
And there she is, beautiful. This costume was created by Jennifer Klein at the library, and she did such a wonderful job. Yeah. I picked out that costume because Dolly had worn it to one of the Academy Awards shows one year, and I just thought it was a particularly gorgeous costume that she wears. So.
Well, they're tremendous marionettes, and here, for those who don't know, Philip is famous worldwide. He's best known for the film Being John Malkovich, but for the kids, here's a character they might recognize.
There she is. That's China Girl from the Disney film Oz the Great and Powerful. And China Girl was a marionette on the set with she performed. I created 2 marionettes. And she performed with the actors real time so that they could actually express themselves correctly with another small actor that was on stage. The director, Sam Raimi, was just wondering how he could do that because she turns into a CGI character, a computer-generated character in the finished film. But he wanted a way, usually when they do a CGI character, they just have a tennis ball and a stick. And the actors are acting to a tennis ball on a stick. Well, you can imagine how challenging that is because it's not doing any expression back. Mm-hmm. And so Sam, when he discovered my work, he decided he wanted me working on set with the actors. And so the marionette did that. She became a real character for the actors on stage.
Right.
And she was voiced by Joey King, a wonderful actor who I loved. I adored her working with her, and she is still doing so many wonderful things.
Well, it makes a big difference to have the puppet there. And you can tell when you watch the film. It's just wonderful work. You should see Philip's work wherever you go. Now, I just want to take a moment now because we have a lot of young ones in the audience, and you could just tell us a little bit. Here's a fella who travels the world performing puppet shows. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in puppetry?
Well, my mother gave me a puppet when I was only 3 years old. She noticed I was very shy. And so I don't know if she consciously thought that the puppet would help, but she brought this little hand puppet back to me, a little hand puppet that just works on the hand, kind of like this. And it was a dog, and Spotty, and that was my very first puppet. And of course, I loved it immediately. Because I was shy, I would climb behind the sofa in the living room, and Spotty would come up over the edge of the sofa and perform. And if anybody walked through the living room, then Spotty would start barking at them or what.
Wow.
And carry on. And so that was my beginning in puppetry.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, friends and family noticed that I had this interest right away. So then they started buying me other commercially made hand puppets, and I ended up with more than 300 of them.
Wow.
When I was about 7 years old or so, I started performing regular shows. I would put together shows, and I was given a little cardboard theater, and I would stage those shows in there for neighborhood children and charge a small fee, and they could come and sit in front of the stage. And it was like 5 cents, I think, were the tickets. And I would perform for everybody in that way. And so I became well known for that.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was a teenager, then I was interested in a little bit more complex type of puppetry. And that's when I moved into the marionettes. And marionettes, of course, are the type of puppet moved by strings. And so that means that they're quite a bit more complicated because the puppeteer doesn't have his hand right on the puppets. Mm-hmm. He has to do everything by a control bar up above the puppets. And then the long length of strings you're dealing with all the time, and they can flow around in all sorts of different ways. So you learn how to do that. And I started doing that seriously when I was about 11 years old. Yeah. And then I collected commercially made marionettes as well for a while. And then when I was 15, I decided there's nothing else I enjoy more than this. I think it's going to be my profession. And I started building my own marionettes and designing them out and building them. And what I did was created variety show so that I could play it anywhere. It didn't matter. If you do a story show, sometimes the stories are only appropriate for certain audiences or certain ages. But when you do a variety show, and that means that would be instrumentalists and animal acts, circus acts, all the different things you see at the circus, like tightrope walkers, trapeze artists, I would build all of those things in marionette form. And then I could do a whole variety circus type of show for anybody, and they could sit and enjoy it. So my shows were always meant to be just wonderful entertainment.
It is wonderful entertainment. It is. If you ever get a chance, if you ever see Philip Huber is performing somewhere, you must go see him. Philip opened our international festival in 2008. And for us, the rest was history. He really shows what is possible, and it's really incredible work. He's the top of his field, and we're so lucky to know Philip Huber. So
yeah. I've been so grateful to do what I love to do. And of course, it's such a joy and a great gift to be able to share this with audiences and everybody. And now even doing it this way through the internet.
Right. Well, hopefully we'll be doing live performances again soon, and we'll be back to see some more of your puppetry, Philip.
Oh, I hope so. I count on that.
Well, thank you very much, Philip.
Thank you, Professor. It was a pleasure being with you.
And thank you for your work on String City.
My pleasure, always.
So the idea is that as years go on, we would add more to the show, which we have done with including Willie Nelson, Eddie Arnold, and Keith Urban. But our most recent addition to String City is the band Old Crow Medicine Show singing their hit Wagon Wheel. Here's a picture of the band. If you don't know them, boy, you really should. They are terrific. And last September, the Nashville Public Library Foundation had a special fundraiser, which had Old Crow Medicine Show doing their song live. And what a response it got. I'll never forget it. Here's a great picture from that event with the puppeteers and the band. And I'm going to play you a little clip from the show. We used the song to sort of spoof the phenomenon of downtown bachelorette parties. And here it is.
Headed down south to the land of the pines. I'm thumbing my way to North Carolina. staring up the road and pray to God I see headlights.
And here is the man himself, Ketch Secor. How are you, sir?
Hello, Storytime girls and boys. I'm doing great, Professor. Thanks for having me back on the show.
Oh, it is so great. Yes, we did have Ketch just a number of weeks ago doing his book, Lorraine. It is such a wonderful book. We've made it into a puppet show. And if you haven't seen that story time, you can go back in time on our Wishing Chair page and find it. So tell us what you've been doing this whole time.
Well, like many of you, I've been home and I've been helping my kids with their quarantine homeschool. So that's been a challenge, but a fun occasion and a very different experience. I've also been writing and recording new music. And I've even got a brand new song that just came out that I think you guys are going to like called Pray for America.
Okay, great. Can you play a little bit of that?
America, to thee, may God's hand outreach. Lord, have mercy on America. Catchy, right? Did you like it?
Very catchy, of course. And you have your Heartland Hootenanny that you do every Saturday night, correct? Online?
That's right. This is my live stream TV show on Saturday nights at 7 Central called The Heartland Hootenanny. And you can tune that in, and it's fun for kids of all ages.
Absolutely. Well, your stuff is great. We love it so much. And I just want to explain, we're here at the very end of our special program about String City. We start the show String City with a song, Will the Circle Be Unbroken? And we end it with that same song. It is the motto for the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum. And you're also a historian of country music. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I would love to tell you what I know about the song, Will the Circle Be Unbroken? I know a few things about it because I've been singing this song for more than 20 years. And one of my favorite places to sing it is right here in Nashville at the Mother Church of Country Music. That's called the Ryman Auditorium. That's another nickname for it, the Mother Church. And the version that I love to sing of Will the Circle Be Unbroken comes from a group of African-American musicians that were known as Blind James Campbell and his Friendly Five. And they played on the street corner outside of the Ryman Auditorium in the 1950s. Now, the influence of African-American musicians on country music is an indelible mark and something that we're especially celebrating in these times. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited to get to sing to you the version that I learned from an old record from a street singer and performer named Blind James Campbell, a Nashville native. It goes like this. I was standing by my window on one cold and cloudy day when I saw that hearse come rolling for to carry my mother away. Now will the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by. There's a better home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky. Now listen to what it does next. Well, I told that undertaker, please drive slow, 'cause the lady that you are hauling, Lord, I hate to see her go. Everybody sing now, will the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by. Oh, there's a home child yonder standing in the sky, Lord, in the sky. Hey, did you like it, Professor? How about you, girls and boys? That's Will the Circle Be Unbroken.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Ketch Secor, Old Crow Medicine Show. Thank you, everybody, for joining us with our special edition of Story Time with the Professor. Thank you all. Bye-bye now.